name is Andy Southgate, and I'll be your host today into the lives of the fascinating people right here at Westminster Palms. All of our residents have had fantastic lives, and they've had many great achievements. Today, we're going to learn some of their stories. We start first with an amazing lady named Phyllis Romer. She's a 7-time national cycling champion. Let's hear what she has to say.
Oh, I'm Phyllis Romer. I live in Palm Isle, and I've been here for 10 years. Having children was a life experience. I only had 2. I make it sound like 6, but I only had 2. That was a life-changing experience. I've had many positions, last one's being in a high school as a vocational counselor. Before that, I taught business education in a vocational school in Miami. I was about 40. Children were all grown up, and my husband had started, and we lived in Miami and then moved to Clearwater. So when we moved to Clearwater, I was not working right away, so I thought I would join him in the evening rides. I couldn't keep up for the first 4 miles. There was a whole group, and they were very fast. So by the end of that year, I could ride faster than my husband. Our club was sending some people to national competition. I forgot where we were in Milwaukee. Said, "You're fast enough, try it." And I did. I got second the first year I tried. But I never finished second after that, except one year I was sick. I always finished first. In my age group. This is not overall women. I've had a collarbone broken, a rotator cuff, 19 stitches over my eye, dislocated fingers, just to name a few. And also that it helped me be conscious of my health and my activities, because I had to do a lot of training. I did weight training and running, and so I'm proud that I did all that. I really am. And I am proud of the fact that most people here know that I have lost the sight in one eye when I was 12 years old, and I accomplished all this. We even did some road racing where you rode with many, many people. So I was proud of that.
7 national titles, and she didn't even start riding until she was 40 years old. Incredible. Up next, we're going to hear from Suzanne Abbott, who was a missionary in Korea for over 10 years.
Well, prior to 1964, I really felt like I was called to be a missionary. And I'd met some Korean students in graduate school, and they gave me a name. My name was Park Sun-hee. Then I went to Korea, and some very interesting things happened. One of the first, I was thinking of this last night, I had never driven a stick shift car. And so the first 2 years I was in language school learning Hanggumal, Korean language. And I went in the 3rd year to a place called Mokpo, way down on the south. And there were 2 families living there, and I had a home. I mean, I was living someplace where someone was on furlough. And so I went out with their big Toyota, it's not Land Cruiser or something it was called. And to get into the compound, we lived on compounds, you had to go up a hill and then turn right and then stop at a gate, and the guy would come out and let you in the gate. So I managed that, and that was as much as I managed, and I couldn't do anything more. So I ran over and said, "Sylvia, bring the car in." Then I spent a lot of time in Gwangju. I had a little Daihatsu truck, and I had a Korean lady, Miss Chung, who went with me. We'd go out to country churches and had all kinds of experiences out there, And the thing about the whole thing is that the Korean way of doing is a lot of different things from ours. And mainly is that they don't seem to need space around themselves. And The first Sunday I was down in Gwangju, a lady who had been doing this kind of thing before said to me, I can't be there this afternoon, so will you go over to the church and just introduce yourself and maybe sing a song or something? Okay. So here the place is crammed with children. I didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, we got over it. The church, we were out at one church in the country, and we were going to show some films to the children. And they were sitting on the floor in this thing, just row after row after row after row after row. And we started to set up, and the electricity went off. This was about 6 o'clock in the evening. And nobody knew why, So people were running around, and the kids were all sitting there just singing or whatever. And they found out that a taxi had run into the pole down at the bottom of the hill. But they would fix it. So anyway, they fixed it about 10 o'clock at night. And all these kids, for these 3 hours in this hot place, the teachers would fan them, and they'd sing songs, and they'd tell them stories. They sat there for 4 hours and then saw the film and thought it was great and went home. I learned Korean, and I learned, well, you can't learn all Korean, like you can't learn all English. You learn a lot. But then later I was teaching in the seminary, and I could prepare a good lesson, a good talk, But when they'd ask questions, there was one little kid who had been burned and who had a really hard time, and he just had a hard time. We worked with it. And at one time he escaped and ran down the aisle in the nude. And the lady, the plane lady, the stewardess, she ran, just what I found. How to say, I guess just knowing that there are differences in people, and we can't say they have to do it our way. We have to know how to work together, and I think that's probably it.
Wow, learning to speak Korean and learning to drive a stick shift at the same time, what a challenge. Up next, we have Miss Sarah Fechter, who was not only a teacher, she was also a pioneer in bringing technology into the classroom.
I taught school for 25 years and raised a family in there in the middle and along with it. I had a math major, and I started out teaching high school math, taught for 3 years, quit to get married, was out a number of years, and when I went back, I started teaching middle school math. And to my surprise, I loved working with middle school kids. Most people don't. But one of the things that I did in my teaching career that made a tremendous difference is that in 1980, now that was a long time ago, folks, I won a little computer, a little Radio Shack computer, and learned how to program it. And right away, I went to my principal and my superintendent, and I said, we've got to teach computers to these kids. They are going to change the world. And the kids loved it. And then after a bit, my supervisor and I wrote a grant, and we got $150,000 to put a computer in every elementary classroom in the school system. Now, we just had 3 elementary schools, so it wasn't real big. But then I had to teach the teachers how to use it. And I tell you, it was a lot harder teaching teachers than it was students. And a lot of them, though, came around. I remember one principal who told me that she had absolutely no use for them. And I said, come on, Alice, give it a try. 2 years later, she was asking for a better computer. And she said, I couldn't do my job without it.
I can't even imagine what a Radio Shack computer actually looks like. Up next, we have Miss Laurel Green, who is a civil servant.
I'm Laurel Green, and I live in Westminster Palms, Palmview, and I've been there about 3.5 years. I'm an administrative law judge for Social Security. I do disability hearings, but I didn't start out with all that. I started out as a teacher, which is all that women could do in the olden days, or be a nurse. And then I was a guidance counselor, and I loved education, and because my parents fostered that, so I got another master's in management, and then when I moved to California, I went to law school at night. Because no matter what you major in, you have to take legal issues in, either business or history or whatever you're doing. So I said, well, I'll just take some law classes for fun, because I could be a professional student. And so I did family law for a while because of my counseling background, and then I came back with the government and have been there ever since. And I'm grateful I live in this country, that I was born in this country, that I live in Westminster Palms, that I had my parents, that I was an Army brat and got to travel around. So I could go for a million things, and I wouldn't say that I'm proud, I'm just grateful for all that. Well, it's great because I'm an introvert in real life, but by having to move around all the time, especially 4 different high schools in 4 different states, you had to be an extrovert. And my parents fostered the 2 A's, athletics and academics. And that kept us out of trouble. We didn't have time for anything else. But by being on a swim team all the time and being athletic, that helped me not be an introvert, because that was something I could do and enjoy, and it wasn't like you had to be the best person in class. Oh yeah, I go to the Y every day, Monday through Friday, and usually swim a mile. When I retire, I want to go over here. They have a master swim team for older people, and I can do that, or even if I don't, I can go over there and swim instead of going to the Y. So this is a perfect location. Oh, well, that's one of the many things I love about Westminster Palms is I'm still the youngest one here, but I am so impressed with what everyone has done in their lives. I was a teacher for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then when I got my master's in counseling, and I was married at the time we went to Germany, I was a guidance counselor at the Army Education Center. So I was doing, it was basically academic counseling for the soldiers to go to college or whatever they wanted to do. And I liked that. And I did that for a few years, and then I got a master's in management and was a management analyst for the government, and then went to law school. Probably being able to help people when we have hearings, but they're not adversarial like on TV, which I couldn't do because I'm a mediator, not a litigator. And the person who thinks they're disabled has an attorney, usually an attorney, and they come in and have a hearing, and I sit at a computer all day looking at medical records, and then I have an idea and the case is worked up, and they've already been to Social Security a couple times at the lower level, and they didn't like the outcome, so they came there. So what I like about it is that it's not adversarial, that if a person meets our criteria for disability, medically and age and education-wise, then I can find them disabled. And if I'm not sure how long they'll be disabled, I can say review in 1 year. So it's helping people and trying, to be fair and honest, about stuff. But and again, it also makes me feel grateful of how blessed I've been, because there are often claimants in front of me who could be my children, and they look like they could be my grandparents.
Laurel has accomplished so much, and we're so lucky to have her right here at Westminster Palms. Up next, we have Gloria Allen, and she was a math teacher for over 30 years, but she learned that she was teaching more than just math.
I'm Gloria Allen, and I live in Palmview.
Mm-hmm.
I've been living here for 2.5 years. I was born and bred in Brooklyn, New York, lived within 30 miles of Times Square until I was 55 years old. I planned to be a teacher, and I trained to be an elementary school teacher. I taught elementary school for 3 years, which was required to get my OPSL certification. And then I left teaching and went into actuarial work. And I stayed there in the corporate world for a while until I became pregnant. And then my husband decided education was where I needed to be. So I went back, I worked on my master's and got certified to be a high school math teacher, which was very interesting because at that time in the 1960s, in New York City, and we're talking about the 5 boroughs, not just Manhattan, in the 5 boroughs, the annual teacher's certification exam, 3 of us passed, and I was the top one. But 3 people in New York City passed the exam that year. Being certified as opposed to being a substitute. I was, supposed to be able to write my own ticket. And for the first few years that I taught high school, I had taught the honors classes. Who's going to teach the slow kids? You teach the brightest kids, And then during the Great Society, when Johnson was president, he brought in the Great Society, and remedial education became the in thing. Not the in thing, became available. And unfortunately for the poor children who had problem in math, it was the gym teacher and the social studies teacher and the cooking teacher who taught them, because the certified teachers were not going to teach them. But I got bribed by my principal to teach a couple of remedial classes. And it was the most wonderful experience I ever had. And it made me see my path in life. I realized that these were bright students who just did not get mathematics. And fortunately, because it was the classes were relatively small, I had maybe under 20 students in the class, I could really communicate with them. And again, they were bright students for the most part, so they were able to verbalize. And I realized at that point that I didn't know math. They would ask me questions, why do you turn that one upside down? Why don't you turn the other one upside down? And I think about it and I said, I don't know. I always, and I had to go and get my elementary books out and learn mathematics. But I learned math, and I realized why it is that students have trouble in math, because nobody answers these questions. My favorite line, I think the students knew what I was doing. They'd ask me a question, and I'd look at my watch, and I'd say, we don't have time for that today. Let's talk about that tomorrow. Which meant that I don't have a clue. I have to go home and figure this out. And that's when I went looking and discovered developmental education, which was a new field at that time. And a lot of people still don't know what developmental education is. Developmental education is for the non-traditional student, in other words, the student who is not, mostly for students who are above the school age, for the adult learner, or the people in unusual situations. But this is not, people say, well, do you mean you're dealing with special education? No, this is nothing of that sort of thing. This is not people who have learning disabilities. These are normal learners, but who have not been taught properly at some point, or, maybe because they were out of the school system, or, whatever.
Right.
But that was the area I went to work in. And that took me out of the high schools and into the colleges. And I started teaching at Hunter College in New York, which is part of the city college system. And I worked with college freshmen who had not passed the math section of the entrance exam. And I had wonderful experiences again, with great success, because ordinarily, one of the things, I didn't follow the curriculum, because the curriculum said start with the first grade and teach them the same stuff they were supposed to learn back in first, second, and third grade. And I developed my own curriculum and worked with these students. And I just had, such success. And, that's the whole thing in teaching. When you teach bright students, you get the honest students, they don't need you. Give them the textbook and let them do it.
Right.
But here I got students who came in who were frustrated, who, the first 2 weeks of class, nobody sat in the front. Everyone sat in the back. And then I got this crawl, but as I began to see that they could do this. You know, then I'd have students sitting in the front row. Well, I say, when you see a student go from frustration to total bliss, and that's the thing, when you have, you know, when you're dealing with students who are average or bright, they want to succeed. There is nothing more frustrating than a student who can get A's in other classes and can't pass. You know, you have your student who gets C's in everything, and that doesn't bother them. But the A student who is failing at something, it's really completely devastated. And when you see that young person, and I say not only a young person, I work with people who are older than I was. You know, I'm not older than I am now, but older than I was then.
Right.
And that's where I get my real satisfaction, in seeing students who not only succeed, but feel successful.
Gloria impacted many lives over her years of teaching. Up next, we'll hear from Alice Winters, who also impacted lives.
This was Columbia, and I was out in the jungle. There were monkeys and snakes and mosquitoes. And did I mention mosquitoes? There were a lot of mosquitoes out in the jungle. I don't know what they're eating now that I'm up here. Well, I went with the Presbyterian Church. They had work out in the jungle, and most of the people that lived out in the jungle had never had a chance for an education. So my job was double, to work with the new churches that were being formed and train lay leaders to become pastors, but at the same time to give them a basic elementary education so that they would learn how to read and write and do some basic math. And this program out in the jungle became a program that was recognized by the government and worked as a project for people, Presbyterians, future pastors, and lots of other people as well, to get an education that they had never had a chance before. I'll tell you something, those people out in the jungle were not stupid. They knew how to go out there with nothing and build a house and make a roof and start a living on their own. I think very few of our PhDs here in the States would be able to do that on their own. There were also guerrilla fighters. These were the years when the guerrilla war in Colombia was just starting up, and I got in on the ground floor. We had open-air churches, and guerrilla fighters would come and carry a Bible and have their meetings in the crowd that gathered outside the church so that the army would not figure out what they were doing. It started out as a disguise, but many of the guerrilla fighters became interested because the way we presented the gospel was very different from what they heard in the cities. We felt that the goals of the church were to strengthen the farming people and to make a difference in their lives, to help them to make a difference in their communities and to build communities. This was very interesting to the guerrilla fighters, and I can remember hiding behind a gasoline tank as bullets whizzed over my head from battles. There were massacres out in that area, and part of my work was to console and strengthen people who had lost family members in those battles. I am so proud of the work that the church did. It wasn't me. It was a group of people who were so ready to discover themselves, to discover their own power, to discover that the way they had been living in poverty and misery for so long didn't have to be. They discovered, as people across Latin America were discovering, that things could be different if they gathered together, if they decided, had a vision, and believed in the future. And it was privilege to be part of that movement that was going on across all of Latin America. I traveled all over Latin America giving workshops and seminars, not just for Presbyterians. It was a movement that touched every part of the Latin American community. Priests and nuns and people from off the street would meet together to study the Bible and to talk about where they were going and what the future held. Before I went to South America, I was living for myself and what life could bring me. Within, I cared about others and I cared about the world around me, but South America and being a part of that movement gave me a vision for the future, for what can be done by the people who live in poverty and in misery, who begin to take consciousness of the fact that life doesn't have to be that way. And I began to take consciousness of the fact that life doesn't have to be that way. And I began to take consciousness of the world. To this day, I care about what is happening throughout Latin America, throughout Africa and Asia, and my vision for the world has grown.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey into the people of Westminster Palms. I know that you have your own story you'd like to share with people, and I'm sure they'd like to hear it. Make sure you go out and you connect with other residents and share your story, and let's truly celebrate you.